It's just been discovered that Wizards of the Coast has created some super exclusive tokens for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and these tokens have awesome artwork. On top of that, Wizards has also come out and made a whole bunch of changes to the Alchemy format in a clear attempt to salvage it.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings! Owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends, I hope the day finds you well, because we have gathered for another juicy installment of Mega Magic News! The two big items on the list are obviously the Kamigawa tokens as well as the Alchemy changes, but I do have a little update in terms of the foil back card that we talked about in a previous video. Now, let's dive in with the tokens, because for me, this is the most exciting thing we're going to talk about today. Let's get it up on the screen. Now, immediately you are going to notice that these are distinctly different from your everyday Magic the Gathering tokens, right? These are not the normal sort of thing you would see. So what exactly is going on here? Well, if you're somebody who is a fan of Japanese Magic manga, you probably already know the answer to the question. But for those of you who don't, there is a comic book called Destroy All Humankind. It can't be regenerated. And it is an amazing and ridiculous comic book concept where it's people literally playing games of Magic, but done in this over-the-top, absolutely epic style of slamming your cards down on the table, and then I do this epic move, and you've got all this crazy stuff going on in the illustrations. Like, it is a very, very fun concept that unfortunately never really made its way to North America. So these tokens are specifically in reference to that series. These are characters from that series, and they are all aligned with the colors they play, which is a nice little touch. So on the left hand, you have Sawatori. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names. I'm bad with the Japanese names. Anyways, Sawatori, right? She is the white player, so having her depicted as an angel here makes perfect sense. Fits right into that theme, right? And then you've got Yakumo, who likes to play black, like reanimator style effects, and that makes perfect sense here. You have her illustrated as a zombie. It's funny because she really doesn't have the normal kind of zombie feel to her. In some ways she does. You've got the dark, gray, desolate nature behind it. You've got the tattered rags hanging off of the city, and off of her body, her pants are actually in really good shape ultimately. But when you take a look at that little like anime girl face and her reaching out, she just looks all happy, like she's running up almost to give you a hug or be like, oh, you got an apple I want to eat. You know, it's just this cute little brains kind of thing, which I adore. But my favorite has to be Lou, because Lou, over on the right here, is a blue player. And on one hand, you can go, okay, you know, we've got a blue player, and they're showing her here in front of, like, water. That makes perfect sense. You got the lily pads. It's got that blue vibe. Honestly, of all the three artworks, this one is my favorite. The angel is my second favorite, and the zombie is the third. But one of the biggest reasons I genuinely love this one the most is because it reminds me of Carpet of Flowers. Now, Carpet of Flowers had its artwork redone by Johann Voss for his Secret Lair, right? And the thing about Carpet of Flowers is it's an anti-blue hoser card. So in this artwork for this token, it literally looks like she is flying in front of a card that hoses blue players. So for me, it turns into one of these things is not like the other. You have a white player who plays with angels and things like that, represented as an angel. Okay, that makes sense. Everything on the card lines up. You've got a black player. Everything on the card lines up with reanimation. You've got a blue player. Everything on the card doesn't line up properly. The island aspect does, but as soon as you go, wait a minute, that's Carpet of Flowers behind her. That's just what is going on here? Like, I like that as a little additional tweak to the flavor. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think that's fun. Ultimately, I think that it's just gorgeous artwork. These are a lot of fun. I wish that Wizards of the Coast would release these sort of things to us here in North America, because as I said, this is mega exclusive. You have no idea. Not only is this limited to Japan, it's limited to Japan, it's limited to Amazon, and it's limited to Amazon in Japan specifically. And by that, I mean you have to use the Amazon.jp version, right? So in America, you have Amazon.com. Here in Canada, we have Amazon.ca. Over in Japan, they have Amazon.jp. But on top of having to order from Amazon.jp, you also have to actually go in and check, because the thing about Amazon.jp, which they will apparently deliver anywhere in the world. So it's weird how all this works. That's my understanding of it. Anyways, though, the thing about it is you can get versions of the Kamigawa boxes online through Amazon.jp that don't have these tokens. So this is like super exclusive. You have to order it through one particular branch of Amazon, specifically in Japan, and you have to make sure that you check in the text description that it is literally an Amazon Japanese exclusive, because if you order a box of Kamigawa from Amazon.jp that doesn't say that, then you're going to get a regular Japanese booster box, and you're going to be very disappointed that these tokens aren't included. I saw a bunch of people talking about this online. Now, only one person, as far as I know, actually had possession of these, and there were a bunch of other people clamoring to get them. So in terms of like market value or availability, we don't actually know yet just how widespread these things are going to be, but they are extremely exclusive tokens. And I have to say, I really do enjoy the flavor concept of them and that comic strip. So again, if you haven't checked it out, Destroy All Humankind, It Can't Be Regenerated. You might find out that you enjoy it quite a bit. Now, let's talk about the foil-backed card situation real quick. If you watched my earlier video, you would have seen me show off this foil-backed card, and at that time, it was one of a kind. It was the only one in existence. Now, I surmised that we would most likely see a bunch of these showing up because there must be at least one full card sheet with backs like this. And that has come to pass. There are now multiple of these available. In fact, one person pulled almost 10 out of one collector's box. So we've reached this situation where if you have a collector's box, you could theoretically be getting one out of every second pack. But bear in mind, there only may be one sheet of these. So while it does make them more common, it is still a super rare misprint. And if you get your hands on it, you can certainly flip it for a fair bit of money. Now, let's move on to what's going on with Alchemy, because this is interesting. Alchemy is a weird beast that really didn't go over the way that Wizards of the Coast wanted it to. Now, they've done an update today where they have changed a bunch of cards. If you're not familiar somehow with the concept of Alchemy, you have Magic the Gathering Arena, where you play Magic the Gathering online. Now, most of the time when you're playing Arena, the cards work exactly the same way that they do in paper. So if you have a paper copy of Goat Tickler, you got a digital copy of Goat Tickler, it tickles goats the exact same way. But with Alchemy, what they're doing is they're going, why don't we have digital versions of these cards where we tweak the abilities, we change the strength, we change the power and everything like that. And ultimately, it's not a bad idea to have a format like this where you can have these digital only cards, because it allows you to react far more quickly to problematic cards. Is this card too strong? Move it down a step. Is this card too weak? Move it up a step. Conceptually, there is some real goodness to the Alchemy idea. Unfortunately, Wizards of the Coast got really greedy with the initial way of doing Alchemy. So they're basically setting it up where it's like, oh, do you want to play Alchemy? You have to buy these separate Alchemy boosters that have fewer cards in them and are set up in this sort of kind of unappealing way to begin with, so we've separated it off. But more importantly, and the biggest failure of Alchemy, is the fact that they forced it onto Historic. So Historic was originally set up as a older format where as your cards rotate out of Standard, you have a format to play them in. And Wizards of the Coast really felt like they were fighting against this concept when we saw, like, when they originally were like, okay, when cards rotate, they're just whatever. They don't want to let you dust them like other games, and the cards become useless because they didn't even have an older format for it. So people keep going, make an older format where you can play these cards. And then Wizards went, we don't want people playing these formats. We want them buying packs. So why don't we just go ahead and say, okay, we're making this older format, but you have to pay 2 tickets for, you have to pay, 2 wild cards for every card. You have to pay twice the cost for cards for this format. And it's like, what? Why? And they said, they literally tried to tell us because it would be fun. But underlying it, it was like, we looked at the numbers and we think it would be bad. So the idea behind Alchemy is supposed to be, we can keep changing things around, we can keep changing up the format, we can keep things new and fresh, but they forced it into Historic. So you can't play with untweaked cards in Historic. If they change a card you really like, it's permanently changed across the board. They didn't create a separate area for Alchemy to exist on its own to see if it could survive and be something that people wanted. They shoved it in and essentially just forced it into Historic, which ruined Historic for a bunch of people. And Alchemy is failing right now. You can tell this because Wizards of the Coast will not admit a failure unless it's so big. They need to address it so that you won't be concerned. If Alchemy was doing good, they wouldn't come out and say what they said. But they came out and said, okay, this is me summarizing. We get it. It looks like Alchemy isn't kind of getting the reaction that we want. We understand that you want an old school format where we don't tweak the cards and all this sort of thing. And we're going to keep Alchemy going, but we promise we're going to try and find this thing that you want to. It was basically a statement. In my opinion, when I read it, it was a statement to the effect saying, Alchemy is a failure. We know it's a failure. You guys aren't playing it. We're trying to force you into this to get more money from you. Unfortunately, it's not working, so we're going back to the drawing board. Now, they're making changes this time around with the Alchemy format in terms of trying to boost up cards that may make the format more appealing for tribal individuals, right? So the idea here is they're taking a bunch of zombie cards from the set, and they are from Innistrad mostly, right? From the Innistrad block. And I call it a block. I don't even, how do you guys quantify this new Innistrad stuff, right? You got Midnight Hunt, you got Crimson Vow, and you got Double Feature. To me, it's just a big old cash grab, shoved together kind of block where it's like, dude, you really could have done one set. You split it into 2 bigger, worse sets, and then crammed it back together to sell it to us like a third time, right? So anyways, it seems to me that Innistrad did not do that well. It doesn't seem like Innistrad is making a lot of big inroads into Standard. It's not making waves. You don't have a lot of people talking about it. Like, sometimes when a new set comes out, it won't completely overshadow the previous set. Like Throne of Eldraine, for example, still stood proudly on its own, even when more sets came out along. But Kamigawa's shown up, and people have pretty much gone, Innistrad who, right? So Wizards of the Coast is taking all these zombie tribal cards, and they're boosting the power level up on them. They're going, okay, we're going to put this one in at flash speed. We're going to drop the casting cost on this one. We're going to push the power and toughness up on this one. Like, they are aggressively pushing a lot of different tweaks to make zombie tribal stronger in Alchemy. And that, to me, is a smart move from the perspective of the company trying to get more people involved. Pick something tribal. You're going to have a bunch of people who like zombies, right? And then on top of that, you've got the scenario where, okay, we've got this huge power level boost on all the zombies you want to use. So now you can use zombies outside of the normal Standard format in a stronger capacity, right? And anybody who just happens to be into zombies might be like, oh, you know what? I never played Alchemy, but if I can use the zombies this way, I might enjoy that. Now, that's not the only changes they're making to Alchemy. They're changing, Fires of Invention is returning to Historic. It was a 4 casting cost. They're moving it up to a 5 casting cost to try and balance it. And that's actually an example of where this kind of a digital format can actually work. Fires of Invention was so busted that as soon as it got spoiled, I made a video saying, this card is going to be a big problem. And guess what happened? They had to ban it because it's a big problem. It's so obvious, right? So being able to tweak those cards afterwards is great. But the problem is their view is when they create something like this, they go, we're going to make a bunch of money. It's going to make it more expensive for you. Here you go. Isn't this going to be great? Isn't it going to be fun? It's like, dude, if you really wanted Alchemy to fly, why don't we get automatically get the Alchemy cards when I get a booster pack of Innistrad. If there are any cards in there that they have an Alchemy version of, why don't they give me the Alchemy version? Why do I have to get multiple versions of a card from you this way? It's not even fair. You already do this thing where I have to have 5 different copies of Opt. Four copies of 5 different Opts because you did different artworks and stuff. So, like, the way that they do things is so slanted towards them in some ways that you just end up going, this is gross, man. Seriously. Alchemy is a failure because Wizards thought it was going to be bigger than it was, got greedier with it than they should, and forced it on the player base. They went, well, you have to play with these in Historic. And then they're like, oh, wait, fewer and fewer people are playing Magic. Wait, fewer people are playing on Arena. Why is this happening? All we did was force you to play in this format you didn't agree to play in. Like, it's like if they just went, hey, you know what? The way that Standard or Modern or Vintage works is changing now. We're changing how all of your cards work, and they match the digital stuff now. So anytime you see something like that, your card has to match whatever we changed it to in the last 2 months. People would stop playing those formats. It would be the end of those formats. They would make their own formats, fan formats that weren't controlled by Wizards, that were the same thing. If Vintage turned into Alchemy Vintage, then you'd have P Vintage, would just be player Vintage, and they would ignore Wizards of the Coast, right? So this Alchemy thing is an absolute debacle, and Wizards of the Coast deserves the results they've got in this case, because they set it up that way. But they're making changes. We'll see how it goes in the future. I don't know, Alchemy seems right now like it's a complete dog. Anyhow, let me know your thoughts. Big thank you to all my patrons, and some videos on the screen for you to enjoy. See you next time.